Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I need to give you some background about my son before I tell you what happened. He's 10 years old and has a medical condition that makes walking really hard for him. When he gets older, it gets worse. He can walk maybe 10 or 12 steps before it starts hurting, so at home he uses this scoot board thing that looks like a square skateboard with wheels. When we go out, he uses a wheelchair. He's super independent and social. This kid knows every nurse at the hospital by their first names and even their pets' names. All the shop workers in our town know him because he talks to everyone. His wheelchair isn't one of those boring gray hospital ones either. It's electric blue with Pokemon wheel covers and animal stickers all over the armrests. The armrests flip up like wings so he can reach his wheels. It's totally his. So yesterday we had our monthly appointment with his pediatrician. We've been seeing the same doctor since my son was born, so he's basically family now. This guy is super chill, probably late 30s, looks like a surfer with long hair. A few days ago during a storm, a tree branch crashed through his usual office windows, so they had to move to a different room upstairs. The doctor came out to the waiting room and told my son about the room change. He explained there were 5 steps to get up there and asked if my son wanted to walk up or get a piggyback ride. My son giggled and obviously chose the piggyback. After checking with me that it was okay, the doctor scooped him up and off they went. I parked the wheelchair against the wall and followed them. After the appointment, the doctor carried my son back down and put him in a regular chair while he went to talk to the receptionist. That's when I looked around and realized the wheelchair was gone. I found it around the corner with some kid, maybe 8 years old, wheeling himself around in it. Look, I get that wheelchairs are fascinating to kids, and honestly, I don't mind when it helps them understand what life is like for kids with disabilities. So I walked over and asked if he was having fun. The kid said yeah, and that it was really cool. I told him that was my son's wheelchair, and I needed it back now so we could go home. The kid immediately jumped out, smiled at me, and I thanked him. I started wheeling it back to my son when this screech happened behind me. The woman yelled at me, asking what I was doing, claiming that was her son's wheelchair and he was riding in it. I tried to tell her it was actually my son's, but she cut me off. She shouted that it wasn't and that her son saw it first. My son stood up and walked those few painful steps toward me because he was getting worried. I explained that this didn't belong to the practice and that I had bought it for my son. She argued that I didn't, and that my son didn't even need a wheelchair because he could walk. She grabbed the wheelchair and tried to turn it toward her, but I held on to the handles. I told my son to sit back down because I could see this wasn't going to be quick and he couldn't keep standing. I asked her to please stop yelling and explained this was my son's wheelchair. I said I had hundreds of photos of him in it on my phone and showed her pictures of him in the chair with his bicycle attachment. She claimed it was a different chair because this one didn't have that thing on the front. I explained that thing was his bicycle hand crank attachment that attached right there with those fittings. I pointed out that the chair in the picture had the same Pokemon wheel covers as this one and told her this was his chair. I pulled the wheelchair back toward me, but she yelled that it wasn't his. She demanded to know why I couldn't wait my turn and told me to give it back. That's when the doctor came back from the reception desk. The woman immediately tried to get him involved, but he ignored her completely. He silently took the wheelchair from me, walked it around the woman, scooped up my son, and settled him in his chair. The doctor told her that was my son's chair and it belonged to him, not to the practice. He said they didn't accept stealing and their existing patients' welfare was their focus. He told her that her behavior today was unacceptable and they had decided not to accept her family as patients. He asked her to leave. The woman screamed about how I'd cost her an appointment with my lies and how it wasn't fair. The doctor just stretched his arms out wide, stood between her and us, and repeated that she needed to leave. He said there would be no further discussion and she wouldn't be seen today or any other day. She grabbed her embarrassed-looking kid's hand and stormed out. The doctor apologized, gave my son a lollipop, and said there'd be no charge for today's visit. He told us to just book for next month. What a legend! We drove the hour home to our small town and stopped at the supermarket. My son loves zooming around getting items from my shopping list. All the staff know him and chat about their pets because he's obsessed with animals. It's like a social event for him. I usually start at the front and work through the aisles while he zooms around collecting random stuff. Sometimes the staff steal him away to the bakery for broken cookies or extra donuts. When he didn't come back for a while, I didn't worry. But when I rounded the corner of the next aisle, I saw him at the far end holding onto a shelf, standing up. Another kid was sitting in his wheelchair. From his posture, I could tell my son was in pain. There was a woman talking to him and getting animated. I hurried down the aisle and took hold of my son. He was crying and told me the kid wouldn't get out of his chair and the woman wouldn't make him move. I asked the other child if he could hop out of my son's chair because my son was in a lot of pain and needed to get back in. My son started shaking from the pain, so I had to lower him to the floor. The woman said no, he wouldn't get out. She said he was having a turn and complained that my bratty kid wouldn't even let him go up and down the aisle more than once before asking for it back. She said her son had a sore ankle, and she was going to tell the manager they needed it more than me. Wait, this was the same woman from the doctor's office. I asked what she meant and told her this wasn't a rental chair, it was my son's chair. She said not to be ridiculous because she saw that chair all the time being used by kids. I explained that she might see it here a lot because we shop here regularly, but it was his chair. She insisted it wasn't his and claimed it was in the store every time she came in with different kids using it. I told her she was mistaken and said it was my son's chair. I mentioned I had photos and tried to find a picture without the bicycle attachment to avoid the same argument as this morning. She said nope, they were taking it, and started wheeling her son away. My son let out this heartbreaking wail of pain and distress seeing his wheels leaving. I ran after her and grabbed the chair, shouting that she wasn't taking my son's chair. The wailing and my shouting brought employees running from all directions. The manager came quickly from the service desk. The woman immediately started yelling at him, saying my son had the chair long enough and her son had a sore ankle so he needed it more. She demanded that they should buy more rental chairs so there were more available. I stepped back because I knew the manager would handle it, but I needed to check on my son who was on the floor crying. I was trying to calm him from a distance while keeping the $4,500 wheelchair in sight. The manager looked at me, then her, then back at me with this "what the hell" expression. He asked where my son was. I pointed down the aisle and told him my son was on the floor. The manager asked with horror if they had tipped him out of his chair. I said I didn't know exactly what happened, but that he was standing holding a shelf when I found him. The manager turned around and almost roared at the woman, telling her to get her son out of a disabled person's wheelchair so we could get my son off the floor. He said it didn't belong to the store and they didn't rent wheelchairs there. The poor kid was trying to get out, but the woman kept pushing him back down, insisting he needed it. The child was nearly in tears. Meanwhile, 2 staff members had found my son and were sitting on the floor with him, holding his hand and drying his tears. The manager was losing his mind, trying to stay professional. Then backup arrived. I saw an employee with 2 police officers who looked like they were on break grabbing lunch. The woman was relieved to see police and started her wailing story again. The female officer shushed the woman and spoke with the manager, who explained that my son and I were regular customers. He knew us, and this was definitely my son's wheelchair. But the woman insisted it was a rental. The male officer walked over and looked down the aisle at my son, then nodded at his partner. The female officer told the woman to get her child out of my son's wheelchair immediately, or she would arrest her for theft. The woman's kid tried to get out again, but she pushed him back in. The officer pulled the wheelchair back and asked the child to hop out. He immediately did. The woman wailed. The officer turned the wheelchair around to her partner, who walked it down to my son. I don't know exactly what happened next because I was focused on getting my son back in his chair and calming him down. The assistant manager took us to the manager's office for some quiet space. She got my son water so he could take his pain medication, and in about 20 minutes, he was okay. He told us what had happened. He'd stood up and walked 2 steps to reach something on a higher shelf when the other kid jumped in his wheelchair and asked if he could ride it up the aisle and back. My son said sure, thinking the kid would just do 1 lap, but the woman wouldn't let that happen. My son said he was trying to be nice, and I told him he was very kind to that little boy, and not to let one mean person ruin his day. After a while, the manager came in and told us the woman was arrested because she made a scene and tried to slap the officers. He said she was also banned from the store and had been causing trouble for a while with her entitled behavior. My cousin and I grew up playing video games together, and even though we're both adults now, we still make time for epic gaming sessions. We had been planning this particular weekend for weeks, a full Friday and Saturday night marathon with a newly released Call of Duty game. We thought it was going to be amazing, though it turned out to be terrible, but that's beside the point. For months, I had been on the hunt for a PlayStation 5. These things were impossible to find anywhere. I'd been searching online constantly, calling stores, even trying to get graphics cards, and the new Xbox was no luck. The demand was just crazy, and scalpers were making it even worse. So when my cousin and I went to our local store to grab snacks and energy drinks for our gaming weekend, I wasn't expecting to find anything special. We were walking through the electronics section when something caught my eye. Behind the glass display case, sitting there like a holy grail, was a PlayStation 5, the last one they had in stock. My heart started racing immediately. My cousin wasn't interested since he already had the new Xbox, so I asked him to go find an employee while I stayed there to make sure nobody else grabbed it. I was practically vibrating with excitement, thinking about all the exclusive games I'd finally be able to play. The employee came over and everything went smoothly. I bought the PlayStation 5, paid the ridiculous price without even blinking, and walked away with the bag clutched in my hands like it was made of gold. I was on cloud 9, already planning out which games I'd download first. That's when she appeared. This woman approached us near the exit with a panicked voice, asking for help. The store employee was still nearby and asked if he could help her, but she made it clear she wanted to talk to me specifically. I told her I didn't work there, just trying to be polite. She pointed at my bag and asked if I was going to buy the PlayStation 5. I told her excitedly that I had already bought it, and was really excited to finally have one. Her whole demeanor changed instantly. The fake sweetness in her voice disappeared and was replaced by something much nastier. She told me firmly that I couldn't have it because she needed it, and offered to pay me double what I had paid for it. Now, let me be clear about something. I had spent months trying to find one of these systems. I'd searched everywhere, called dozens of stores, spent hours refreshing websites. There was absolutely no amount of money that would make me give this up. I explained this to her as nicely as I could, saying I wasn't interested in selling it because I've been looking for months. That's when she completely lost it. She started yelling that I didn't understand and that she needed the PlayStation because her son was expecting it. I tried to stay calm and suggested she try calling other stores to find one. She got even angrier and demanded that I give it to her right then and there. The store employee, who had been watching this whole exchange, stepped in and warned her that if she continued to harass customers, he would have to ask her to leave the store. She completely ignored him and told him she didn't care what he said because she was going to get that PlayStation no matter what. That was my cue to get out of there. I told my cousin we needed to leave, and we quickly headed for the exit. I could hear her still arguing with the employee behind us, but I didn't look back. We made it to my car and I started pulling out of the parking space, feeling relieved to be getting away from the crazy woman. I was driving slowly through the parking lot when I saw her in my rearview mirror. She was running toward her car, but I didn't think much of it. People run to their cars all the time, right? I made it to the road and started driving toward home, planning to stop by my cousin's place first to set up the new system. About a mile down the road, I heard honking behind me. I looked in my mirror and saw something unbelievable. It was her, in a fancy BMW, riding my bumper and swerving back and forth across the lanes like some kind of maniac. She was honking non-stop and flashing her lights. My cousin and I just started laughing. It was so ridiculous that it was almost funny. I ignored her completely and just kept driving normally, thinking she'd eventually give up and turn around. But she didn't give up. For 10 whole minutes, she stayed right behind me, honking and swerving dangerously around other cars on the highway. Other drivers were having to move out of her way because she was driving so erratically. Then I heard sirens. I looked in my mirror and saw the beautiful sight of a state police cruiser with its lights flashing right behind her BMW. My heart jumped with joy, thinking justice was finally coming for this crazy woman. But then something weird happened. She moved to the right lane and the police car passed her. To my complete shock, the officer pulled up behind me instead, hit his air horn, and motioned for me to pull over. I pulled over to the side of the road and she pulled over behind the police car. The officer approached my window, treating me like I might be drunk or something. The officer asked if I had been drinking, explaining that he had received a call about my vehicle swerving all over the road and driving at erratic speeds. I told him I hadn't been drinking at all and that there must be some kind of misunderstanding. That's when she got out of her car and came running over, screaming at the top of her lungs for the officer to arrest me because I had stolen her PlayStation 5. I was completely dumbfounded. I quickly explained to the officer what had actually happened, that I bought the PlayStation at the store, and this woman had been following me and harassing me. The officer looked confused but asked me to prove that the PlayStation was mine and that I had paid for it. She immediately jumped in and insisted that wasn't true, claiming that I knew she had bought it and that I had grabbed it from her in the parking lot. She thanked the officer for being there. I knew from working in retail years ago that receipts show the last 4 digits of the payment card and the cardholder's name. I told the officer I had the receipt if that would help. She immediately claimed that I had stolen the receipt from her too. This is where I knew I had her. I explained to the officer that all receipts show the last 4 digits of the card used and the cardholder's first initial and last name. She yelled that her name was on the receipt. I pulled out my driver's license, my bank card, and the receipt, handing them all to the officer. Everything matched perfectly. The officer looked at everything carefully, then handed my stuff back to me and turned to face her. She demanded to know if he was going to arrest me for being drunk, since I had been driving all over the road. The officer paused for a moment, then pulled out his handcuffs and walked toward her. She looked terrified and asked what he was doing. The officer told her that she was under arrest for making a false report, misuse of emergency services, and violating the state's stalking laws. Her face went completely white. The officer called for a tow truck for her BMW and put her in the back of his patrol car. When they drove away, I could see her screaming and pounding on the window. My cousin and I sat there for a minute trying to process what had just happened. Then we both started laughing. It was the most insane thing either of us had ever experienced. I got to go home and enjoy my new PlayStation 5 that night, while she spent the entire weekend in jail. Later, I found out through a friend who worked at the courthouse that she pleaded guilty to making a false police report and harassment. She got 2 years probation and was banned from the store until her probation was completed. I'm 17 and just started my freshman year of college. My sister is 18 and also a freshman at a different school that costs about the same as mine. Our parents weren't wealthy, but they always talked about how important education was. They started saving for our college funds when we were little kids. Mom worked extra shifts at the hospital and Dad took on weekend construction jobs. They'd always tell us they wanted us to have opportunities they never had, and that education was something no one could ever take away from us. My sister has always been obsessed with soccer. She started playing when she was 5 and was pretty decent at it. Not scholarship good, but she made varsity in high school and really loved the sport. When she was about to start freshman year of high school, our parents sat her down for what they called a serious conversation. Dad explained that they needed to talk about soccer and her future. My sister asked what he meant. Mom told her they'd noticed that some teams in the league played really aggressively and that my sister wasn't the biggest player out there. Dad then laid out their ultimatum. If she wanted to keep playing soccer, that was her choice, but she needed to understand that any injury-related medical bills would come out of her college fund. My sister protested that it wasn't fair and asked what would happen if she got hurt doing something else. Mom explained that normal accidents were different, but soccer was a choice and a risky one. They were just being honest about what they could afford. I remember thinking it was kind of harsh, but I also understood where they were coming from. Our family didn't have much extra money, and medical bills could be really expensive. My sister agreed to keep playing, so I figured she was okay with the arrangement. Everything was fine until sophomore year. During a regular practice, my sister went to make a cut and just collapsed. No contact with anyone, no collision, nothing. She'd torn something in her knee pretty badly. The doctor said it was one of those freak injuries that just happen sometimes. The surgery alone cost $8,000. Then there was physical therapy twice a week for 4 months, follow-up appointments, medications, and all kinds of other expenses. When everything was said and done, it came to about $12,000 total. All of it came directly out of what would have been her college fund. Now we're both in college, and while I can cover most of my expenses with the money our parents saved, plus some small loans, my sister is looking at taking out significantly more debt. She is bitter about the whole situation and brings it up constantly. Last week we were in a group chat with about 8 of our friends from high school. I made some joke about how broke I am from buying textbooks, saying the books cost more than my car was worth. My sister immediately responded by saying to imagine paying thousands more because your parents don't want to pay for your medical bills. I was mortified. This was really personal family business, and she was just throwing it out there for everyone to see. I sent her a private message asking if we could not talk about family stuff in the group chat because it was really personal. She asked me if I was embarrassed of how our parents treated her. I told her it wasn't about being embarrassed, but that she knew the risks when she decided to keep playing soccer. That's when she completely lost it on me. She asked if I was kidding and pointed out that she was only 14 years old at the time. She also emphasized that it wasn't even a contact injury. I responded that she still chose to play, knowing what could happen. She told me I was supposed to be her sister and should be on her side, not defending our parents. Then she asked if I knew how messed up it was that they paid for my dental work last year but wouldn't pay for her surgery. I argued that was totally different because I needed braces for medical reasons. She shot back asking about medical reasons, saying my teeth were just crooked while her knee was actually broken. She went on to call me a terrible sister and demanded that I talk to our parents about covering her medical expenses retroactively. She said if I didn't, it proved that I only cared about myself. The thing is, I do feel bad for her situation, but I also think our parents were clear about what would happen, and she chose to keep playing anyway. They weren't trying to be mean, they were just being realistic about money. But then I started thinking about what she said about my dental work. It did cost about $3,000, and while my bite was a little off, it wasn't causing me pain or anything. Our parents paid for it without question, because the dentist recommended it. My sister has been posting on social media about parents who don't support their children's dreams and families who put money before their kids' health. She's not mentioning us by name, but our extended family follows her accounts, and I'm pretty sure they're putting 2 and 2 together. Last weekend, our aunt called our mom, asking what was going on because my sister had been venting to our cousins about the situation. Mom was really upset and asked me if I knew why my sister was telling everyone our private business. When I explained what happened, Mom got defensive. She said they were very clear about the agreement and that my sister made her choice. I mentioned that my sister was really struggling with the debt and felt like they treated us differently. Mom replied that they'd always treated us girls fairly and that my sister could take out loans like millions of other students do. Dad overheard and jumped in, saying he worked 2 jobs to save that money. He emphasized that she chose to risk it on a game and that actions have results. Now my sister isn't talking to our parents at all. She comes home for visits but barely says anything to them. She's been staying with friends during school breaks instead of coming home. Our parents keep asking me what they did wrong, and my sister keeps asking me to tell them they need to make this right. The whole family is falling apart over this, and I feel like I'm stuck in the middle. Part of me thinks our parents should have just paid the medical bills and figured out the money situation later. But another part of me thinks they were being responsible by setting clear expectations. I don't know if I should stay out of it completely or try to help fix things. My sister thinks I'm a terrible person for not automatically taking her side, and my parents think she's being ungrateful and dramatic. Everyone expects me to pick a side, but I honestly don't know what the right answer is here. What really bothers me is that this whole situation has made me realize how differently our parents might have handled things if it had been me who got injured. Would they have been so strict about the results? I hate that I'm even thinking about it, but I can't shake the feeling that maybe my sister has a point about the unfair treatment. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.